So, as I briefly said as we were getting started, this is the part 2 to the earlier presentation that was done. It's, to a large extent, it's just not even possible to do a quick review of the previous 2 hours. So if you are now watching this presentation after the recording date of November 2nd, 2020, you want to stop here, you want to watch the other one first, go through the other slides here first, and may make things a lot easier to go through here. As people know, I've been doing security for quite a while. There's so many topics in security. I happen to be very opinionated about a lot of them. You're going to hear me only making 1 or 2, maybe 3 recommendations on any given topic. I can explain some of those if needed, but this is one of those things that just over the years of doing so many different types of primarily IT and system administration and WordPress since version 2.2, you start saying, all right, this is the plugin I want to use, this is the tool I want to use, yada, yada, yada. So hopefully everybody is going to be able to ask questions along the way. If you have other questions that you want to ask, don't hesitate. All right, remember how I said I can't easily summarize the first part? Oh yeah, how can I summarize it? So here's the reality. There's a lot of aspects of security. They go from the mundane issues with social engineering and people, working you in some capacity, or just even the simple phone call that leads to somebody trying to extract some information out of you. But I want to try to start focusing on the end of what happened in the part 1, which if you look on the lower right, you see firewalls, because in the end, the firewalls start becoming the biggest wall that you can put up in front of everything that's going to possibly cause you security concerns. I mean, passwords is a big thing, but firewalls, let's go there. So what's a firewall? I'm oversimplifying this by saying it's like this crazy filtration system. It takes data that is running across the internet or an intranet inside, and it kind of like categorizes it, and it sifts through it, and it throws these packets this way and those packets that way, and all of a sudden it has a rule set that it goes through, and at one point in those rules, it says, all right, this is not good. We got to throw this out, or this is destined for this other location, which is the dumpster. It's traffic cops, essentially, not only on the internet, on your website, within WordPress, in your house. You have firewalls all over the place. But the primary firewalls that are out there, you don't see them. They exist at the network level, the infrastructure level. There's a lot of traffic that's filtering that's happening out there. But the key is now, how do we get this down to where are we going to take advantage of the firewall capabilities? Are we going to do that with a plugin to WordPress? Are we going to do this in the cloud if we can? Are we going to rely on our host to do it? So the network level stuff, when they say in the cloud, that usually means Cloudflare to a lot of people. Sucuri, S-U-C-U-R-I, S-U-C-U-R-I. Encapsula is another type of massive firewall out there. And the host, this is now when it starts becoming fairly technical, because this is put in by people who are maintaining the servers. The network administrators, they'll have stuff that they'll start slinging around, all this, I don't know, IP tables, UFW, CFS, LFW, fail to ban, mod security. There's a whole bunch of things that happen there. Now, the server level, now, not talking about at the actual hardware level up above or this OS level, but at the server itself, the stuff that gives us the internet. Apache is what most people are familiar with. There are firewalls that are there. The popular one is Jeff Starr's 6G firewall. Now there's a 7G firewall. And a lot of people do manual manipulations to Apache files, these HT access files or Nginx conf files. Even, it's interesting because even iThemes security, there are even plugins that will alter your HT access files so as to give you some protection there at that server level before it even gets close to WordPress. The application level is where, let's see, I'll give you the best idea of something that's right there. If you install WordFence and you get this little warning that says you need to actually alter your htaccess file and point to a special piece of code, that is that little piece of code that is running right before it hits WordPress. And then once it gets into WordPress, there are firewall capabilities that you can run within there. So, I think BBQ Pro actually provides within the plugin itself firewall access. So where do you filter? That's what it comes down to. And the best place to filter traffic, the best firewall is at the very top. Network, next best place is the host. Next best place, down and down and down and down. And you want to make sure whenever possible that you are taking care of as much firewall-oriented security outside of WordPress if you can. And the way that it's done with a lot of people are buying into this idea of a web application firewall. So web application firewalls, by the way, I want to point out that not all of the web application firewalls have these features that you're looking at here. But essentially, a web application firewall knows very specifically about a given application. In this case, it's WordPress, and it will go out of its way to protect WordPress at a much more granular level. So it can go out of its way to say, oh, we know that this particular exploit exists in this plugin. Let's filter it right then and there. Web application firewalls, not required, though they are a really, really good thing if you don't do a lot of security stuff. So it's sometimes it's like one of those cheap entry points. You just buy a web application firewall, especially if you can get one that does not run on your server, or one that doesn't run right before WordPress, or one that doesn't run inside of WordPress. And then you have a much higher level of protection. So the thing that came up over the last couple of months since the part 1 presentation, as well as I've been asked for so long, like, what do you do? What do you do security wise? So I have come up with a with some ideas. I got some ideas in mind. I think by the end of this entire presentation, when you mix and match all the other things that I'll show you, and more importantly, if you have the time to implement them, you'll probably find that there will be enough. You will not need to go through these particular items. But if you're, I'll give you an idea. You can get away with no plugins whatsoever if you're the only user and administrator or editor on a site. If you have multiple people that you need to get onto a site, you can get away with having just one plugin. And so this is my all-time summary for the 2-hour presentation we had before. How to wrap up what you should be doing depending on price level. So MFA, I'll get into it in the following slide, the multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. Quite important. It just gives you that extra level of password and one-time password protection. And now, you know what? Before I even get into multi-factor authentication plugins, let me tell you something here. There's a base assumption. My base assumptions before going into this is that you have a great web host, not a good web host. You have a great web host. You are doing frequent backups. You're doing updates to the core, to the plugins that you have, to the themes you have installed. You're using strong passwords. Then you can do the multi-factor authentication, the two-factor authentication. You can also, for free, do Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a number of wonderful built-in security features that will get you very, very, very far, and will also speed up your website for not the first couple of viewers, but it's because it's not a true CDN or content delivery network, but subsequent users will actually get it a little bit faster. And there is this idea of using an activity logger. From the earlier presentation, you might recall that word fence to a large extent is really just something that alerts you to what is going on. It logs all these activities. It will then tell you this administrator signed on, this particular plugin has been activated, et cetera, et cetera. And there are free activity loggers that are out there. So if you want to do things for free, there you go. You can get away with it with a few page rules, as they call them. By the way, if you're using Cloudflare right now, do not set the security page rule higher than medium. Medium, the high security just won't get you there. It'll lock out way too much. So Cloudflare automatic platform optimization is now a one-click feature that they added onto all of their offerings. This is Cloudflare specifically. Normally their free plan, completely free, you get in there, but now you can actually add on a $5 a month plan that is a little bit different than that $20 big step up. And what it lets you do is essentially provides a one-click turn on everything within Cloudflare, set up all this, the rules, no big deal. Here's all your rule sets. If you want a crazy speed boost, it'll give you that as well. It's really kind of like one of these set it and forget it's. It does not, however, include a web application firewall. You need to step that up to the next level at a $10 a month, or right around $10 a month is what it works out to. And that is Security is my current recommendation here at the end of 2020. It is a web application firewall plus a plugin that has the web application firewall running in the cloud. And you can actually spend the same $10 a month and have something like WordFence or WebArcs, or there's a number of other options that for that amount of money, you can run a web application firewall on the server, on your host, right before WordPress, in some cases within WordPress. But you might as well just take advantage of the fact that everything is being filtered before it even gets close to your server, before it even gets close to WordPress. Big step up from there, $20 at that point. Cloudflare Pro. If you have high traffic for your site, if you're concerned about competitors jumping on you, hiring little bots, having bots attack you in some capacity, other security concerns, you are already aware of what Cloudflare Pro does. You probably even use it for pushing data to the edge. It does a whole bunch of other features. It comes with rate limiting, WebP polish. It's a whole big thing. It's one of those, you put this in, you don't need anything else. You really don't. It's crazy how good that is. I wish that all my clients would just say, let's go ahead and do that. I wouldn't have to worry about other stuff. And I've been asked multiple times, what is the one thing, if I had just to spend one bit of money? A few years ago, I bought a limited lifetime subscription to blah, blah, blah. There's something called Bulletproof Security Pro that is actually quite impressive for the one-time payment of $69 and change. So backing up for a second, I want to get back to that free aspect there. The plugin, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. This is the best, easiest, lightweight, and free plugins that you can utilize in order to get that second factor authentication where somebody has to enter a limited time code. It is by far the most important thing, in my opinion, to add in. A lot of sites that I work with, that's the only additional security feature that they will have besides the free Cloudflare plan. So I want to say that again. This is the only plugin I have running on a number of client sites without any kind of problems, plus using that free Cloudflare plan. Now, getting into Cloudflare, it's I say here, change over your DNS. That is not the simplest thing. I hope everybody's realizing, I feel like this is the roller coaster ride. We're going to start getting faster really quickly here. You have to change over your DNS and make sure that the proxy, that little orange cloud, is lit up. Once it is, then you can use those blue icons that are below it. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on the next few slides. You can always come back to view this information. You can always download the slides at my website of ambient.vision to get the information that thing. But here's the thing. You get what are called 3-page rules, specify how traffic can proceed in and out of pages. You get 5 firewall rules. You can block countries. It's if you don't do business in Vietnam, China, Russia, Indonesia. I can name about another dozen others. You can just eliminate all that traffic coming to your website in one fell swoop. And there's also a feature that they have called Scrape Shield, which will do hot link protection for you, clickjacking protection, as well as obfuscate any kind of email addresses you have on there. So this is a whole bunch of additional security things in one big shop. But those firewall rules are what really make it interesting. Again, I'm not going to linger too much on them here. If you are familiar, if you know from that previous video, previous presentation, you probably remember some of these things. These are the actual rules that you can employ within Cloudflare to protect the majority of things. You can do it in 5 rules. You can alter them a little bit. There's there's a debate whether you want to eliminate all refers that are coming off of your site, coming off of subdomains, for example. You have to start paying attention to any type of plugins that might have issues where they're self-reflecting upon themselves. But I am not kidding you, is if you copy and paste these into your Cloudflare firewall rules and test them to see how they're making out, you'd be kind of surprised by how much stuff is not going to get anywhere close to your WordPress site. And don't just blindly copy and paste. Make sure you change example.com to your domain. That would help, wouldn't it? So I feel good about these. I felt good about these over the last number of months. I think that you can actually get away nowadays at the end of 2020 with having an ultra cheap plan on a ultra cheap web host and utilize that $5 a month Cloudflare plan and be shocked that it is performing as well as one of these $30 and month plus plans. The users will be thrilled about it. That's until you try to access the back end and start editing things in your Bad Daddy account, and then everything's slow. The users get a great platform optimization. They get all the speed. They get all the security. So I hope this is a good start for people. Now let's graduate pretty heavily here. Most people would actually start saying there are things that you can do within WordPress that will provide security by essentially hiding things, changing them just a little bit. I am going to tell you that this is an unsound strategy. These things that are on the screen right now, people are doing left and right. There are even plugins that do these things. These are just things that just hide things from the outside world. They really don't do much. Most of the bots that are good out there, and almost all the hackers that are WordPress specific, this is nothing to them. They get past this right away. And by the way, the third item down that says moving the WP config file to the directory above your WordPress install, you can do that without any problems. Most people think it has to be in that very specific location. You can move it outside your WordPress install. There are things like Roots, the Bedrock project, other types of implementations of WordPress that do that for other reasons, not necessarily for security. So, separating your multi-factor authentication from your password manager. I imagine a number of us have LastPass or 1Password, and you have all of a sudden, that new QR code that you can scan in immediately into your favorite password manager. I would start suggesting that you don't do that. Keep your passwords separate from these authentication things. Passwords are what you know. One-time passwords, multi-factor authentication, is what you possess, what you have. Look into Authy or Google Authenticator. If you really are concerned about things, you can start doing YubiKey or Google Titan Security Key. And if you do use all these types of systems, just please, please, please only buy them from the people that make these things. Don't go onto eBay and start buying your YubiKey. Buy it directly from them. So passwords. So many different ways of having passwords. Some, you know what I mean by passwords policies. Their length or history. I can't reuse it. They have complexity. You have to add at least 3 characters, no underscores, those types of things. There are ways of doing this within WordPress if you feel you need to. It gets a little tricky for people that are being forced to do this if they're using WooCommerce or a learning management system or a membership site. These sometimes early on, these strong password policies just turn users off. Going down the list, some of these may be familiar with people, except for probably that last one, which I'll cover a little bit later. Your email also has security issues that you'd be a little shocked by how often they appear in plain text that anybody can actually start diving into once they get access to your site. Recently, we've been hearing a lot about how WordPress now wants to make sure that everything is a minimum version of PHP 7.2 with a preference for 7.4. I'm of the belief that January 2021 is PHP version 8. Things on WordPress should work on PHP 5.6, but from a security standpoint, what do you run? And I'm going to suggest that you don't run the latest and greatest. Stick with one version behind. In this case, today, it's version 7.3. And a lot of that is not necessarily from a security concern. It's for a compatibility concern. Interactions of plugins, the way that different themes were set up originally that may not be going forward. 7.3 is fast enough. It's secure enough. I would just go with it. By the way, it says aggressively limit IP access. You can do this also on Cloudflare. You can actually specify the individual IPs or ranges, not just do it based on countries or big places. Theme editor being turned on starts now becoming a security issue for your signed in users. So the best way to potentially get around that is to just start setting up better user roles. From a security standpoint, there's a strong wisdom to doing your major site design edits as an administrator. But when you start doing blog posts or start doing any kind of content symbol stuff, just have yourself as a regular author. But if you now have to start playing around with somebody's a shop manager but shouldn't do this on the site, or somebody who has just limited shop manager access to WooCommerce, there is a plugin, user role editor, that gets you going really fast on that. I am not a big fan of logging out idle users. I think that if you ask yourself right now, do I need to log out idle users automatically? Then you can do that. You know, it's a security issue potentially. You can force everybody to log out if you need to in a couple of different ways. But that's something you have to ask yourself. And I don't know if anybody here is doing a multi-site installation of WordPress. Some security plugins, if you choose to use them, just don't run at all under multi-site. I would suggest generically avoiding the multi-site networking features unless you are unbelievably sure that the themes, the plugins, and all the passwords can be maintained over time. On the other hand, you can just use the multi-site for the exact same benefit. keeping all the themes and the plugins and aligned the exact same way and updated. It says here, if you're using WooCommerce, I'd like to say, again, it's learning management systems, it's membership systems, it's something that's really, really specific for dynamic WordPress websites, not necessarily brochure websites or static websites. Register your website with these search engine tools, and there's a lot of them now. Google Search Console is what we most people probably know, but Bing has something called Webmaster Tools, and so does Yandex, Yandex. And those free Webmaster tools, you can use their systems to leverage their infrastructure to tell you the health of your website as time goes on. It'll start telling you something's problematic. These pages can't be accessed, things like that, without you even have to go to that website. And backup. We hear about backups, and then backups, but there's also this idea of archiving them, shifting them away for long-term storage. It is incredibly cheap to do these things. It is incredibly easy to do these things. There's even ones that are, Amazon has something called Deep Glacier, Wasabi's out there. And how about this? Just take your data and put it into a safe or a safe deposit box. Just get it into a deep storage, archive the stuff. You never know when you have to turn back to something that you had a few years ago. And that could be for a number of reasons. And by the way, to give you an idea about how inexpensive this kind of stuff is, I think Amazon Deep Glacier is around $1 per terabyte. It's obscenely cheap not to be able to toss stuff out there every once in a while. So, all right, so let's take a pause before things really get faster. How's everybody doing out there? Doug, do you have any questions?
Yep, Doug Noyle, I believe, has a question.
I knew if I took a bite of dinner, you guys would ask me a question. Always happens that way. Hi, everybody. Yes, going back to the WAFs, the web application firewalls. David, what do you feel is the comparison for some of the WAFs that come with our hosting plans, some of the better hosting plans out there versus the Cloudflare product you are suggesting?
All right, excellent question. So I'm going to answer it a slightly different way. The web professionals that keep track of malicious plugins, the people that keep track of problematic potential signatures that may indicate future problems, those people that do those zero-day exploits, they're all talking amongst each other. They all communicate amongst each other. And the primary contributors to that group is Encapsula, number one, is number two, WordFence, number three, Security, and number four, Cloudflare. It seems to be those are like the big group of people who know what are going on. You can use, depending on who your host is or what their network infrastructure is, somebody who is utilizing one of their systems to great effect. So I'm sorry that was a very generic answer there for you, Doug, but it really depends on what they're utilizing and then what people trust. And I just trust in that little, I feel like the little cabal of people who know more about viruses and malware than should know.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, Asim is next.
David, is this the right time to ask about a DDoS attack, or are you going to cover that later as well?
I will get into that a little bit. So come back to that with possibly even a more specific question as we get further.
Okay.
By the way, what he's referring to is called DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks. Oversimplified, this is where a whole bunch of other computers or servers that are out there on the internet are all flooding your particular website or your server or your shared host with a lot of requests where it just simply cannot answer sometimes even any of them. DDoS, it brings systems to a crawl. Cloudflare has built into it free DDoS protection at their basic level, and at their pro level, they add some additional DDoS protection. So Cloudflare covers the bulk of it.
Okay. Doug Ryder is next.
Hey, David. I had a question regarding like if you're having an issue with your server, or not your server, but your WordPress site, and a developer needs to come in and get admin access. I usually set up an admin access for them, but I've been using a little tool called revealit.me, which can securely send them their username, password, and all that credentials. I hate sending it to them in emails. So I was just wondering, is there another service that you know that can do similar things? I don't really, the one that I'm talking about is revealit.me. It's by the same people that do WP Rocket.
Yeah, so I'm actually familiar with revealit.me. I think that if you really are concerned about passing any type of secure information across the internet channels, there's a couple of different ways to do it. The cheapest way to do it, I think, is actually to take half of it. I saw this with a credit card recently, where they sent half of it via email and half of it via text message. It was lame, but it worked. They split it across two things. There is something that I strongly recommend for people that is referred to as Keybase, Keybase, and Keybase lets people send you not authenticated information, not just things that are signed from you, meaning they will know that it truly came from you. It's a derivative of PGP for those that are technically inclined. It's free, Keybase. It was actually just recently purchased by Zoom. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. Dean is next.
Two quick questions. One, I noticed on one of your slides you said disable account ID 1, the administrator. What's the basis for that?
Yeah, so a number of older installs of WordPress that go back years and years and years always started the first user as just user number 1. It was the default administrator user. It always had administrator access. It almost always started with a name like admin or administrator. And you did not have to determine the name of that user in order to start going after it. You can just simply look for user ID 1 and take a good hope that it was the administrator user. So the idea here is not necessarily to delete that user, but more so just to neuter it, just cut it down to size, meaning take that user number 1, or possibly even for a lot of us, the original administrator account that was set up there, the first account that was set up, create yourself a brand new administrator account, go ahead and create it, log in as that, and then take that first user, hopefully it was user ID 1 if it's an old install, and make it a editor or an author permission level.
Okay.
Then you've taken care of the whole issue.
Okay, so it's not really about account 1 with current versions of WordPress. So that kind of leads to
depends on the install. It actually depends on the install, because there is some install, like quick installer software that still does user number 1.
Okay, which leads to the second question. You talked about passwords, and passwords are managed by WordPress itself. So are you implying we just need complicated passwords, or that there is, memberships and WooCommerce and those sorts of things, they're using the WordPress password system. So there's no, you don't have underlying concerns about WordPress managing passwords, do you?
No, I don't. Yeah, boy, I hesitated now. Everyone's probably buzzing what I'm hesitating about. So if you do all the other security precautions, I would not be concerned that WordPress has any current known exploits for that. But all that being said, WordPress uses a fairly insecure MD5 based password hashing, and bcrypt is now considered to be the more modern, secure password hashing. So I wouldn't be shocked that the folks in WordPress would probably remediate that in the upcoming year. Boy, that was a long answer for a simple question.
Well, and
Nothing to do with
people are
what I just answered.
reversing the hashes now because they find that information and do the correlation elsewhere, and that helps them. It's more social engineering.
Yeah, well, so there's something I keep on a lot of sites that is it's called WP Password Bcrypt. You have to install it really early, and it replaces the insecure MD5 password hashing. It's not a required thing, right? Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's it. Doug Ryder, I think you still have your hand up from before. Does anyone else have any questions?
All right.
All right.
Sounds good. So email security, I am going to be really quick about this particular one so I can move on to potentially more interesting things. But the fact of the matter is that email that is going out of WordPress has issues. You need to pay attention to the types of emails that are being sent and whether they're being sent from the server or SMTP, which is the protocol that most of us use every day to send email. Sadly, from an SMTP standpoint, a lot of these plugins put that information into the database in plain text. And the concern there is that if WordPress does get compromised, if people do have access to your database, they now have access into sending emails on your behalf, potentially, but it's something that they can get into. So there are ways of tucking that SMTP information away in functions and WP config files that you never have to worry about. You want to go out of your way to add in at a DNS level the most important policies that are needed for sending emails. That is a big security concern. That SPF, which is a shipping policy, that just simply says which server emails you can be sent from. If you're going to send you're going to send something from Google, then that's the shipping policy. DKIM is like a digital. I think of this as a digitally sign your email. This way, the recipient will verify that it came from you. DMARC is the current big one. It's really important that people have that. That essentially prevents people from sending an email on your behalf, is what that does. And that there's things at the bottom. Should you use SendGrid, Mailgun? Should you use these things? How about yes. Yeah, if you have a low volume site, yeah, sure, why not? Use Gmail. It is a good idea to get your transactional emails, these things that send out orders or receipts and things like that, get that off of the regular WordPress email system. You'll have a lot more of an ability to make sure people see those things in the inbox and not have the security across the internet concern. Security across the internet also takes place in the DNS side of things. DNS, by the way, is one of the oldest protocols on the internet. It's like the phone book of the internet. You need to have everything being looked up. It's what, when you type in google.com, it's what translates that into the 16.2, that IP address. There are now security extensions that have been added on since it was not designed with any thought towards security initially. The big one now is the domain name security, system security extensions. That second one that's listed down there. This will essentially make it, it'll make it harder for people to hijack a request that you're making out there and returning to you a little bit of fraudulent website information. That's been happening out there. Privacy is something that you can actually set in most of the domain things. It'll make sure that if somebody looks you up, they won't say that this particular site is owned by you with your home address potentially. If you have not locked your domain with your registrar, that prevents transfers from going out. There's this new stuff, DOH. I love that. I love that. That's my favorite. It's my favorite new acronym, by the way. DOE. 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 It stands for DNS over HTTPS. DOE. It's the best thing about this acronym is yes, it is an acronym that contains two other acronyms, DNS and HTTP. Oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm geeking out here. There's also, by the way, a failover strategy from a security standpoint. You can actually, this is kind of like, I feel like this is the poor man's high availability of your website solution. If you want to make it so that if your web host goes down completely, you can pay a lot of money for what they call HA or high availability. However, you can use like a feature like DNS Made Easy as an example. They have something called a DNS failover, and it'll immediately, when it sees a site is down, it'll switch over to a completely different host that is running essentially the same URL. Very, very clever for doing that. So from an email standpoint, from a DNS standpoint, any stuff before I get into master levels?
Doug Noyle's got a question.
Yeah, just on that last point, the failover strategy, you mentioned DNS Made Easy. Is that automatically in there, or do we have to go in and activate it?
You do need to activate it within DNS Made Easy, and it does cost something with them. Okay. There are the people that provide those types of solutions, as well as there's actually a couple of organizations out there that will switch over DNS automatically through either Cloudflare or DNS Made Easy without you having to set it up on those systems. I suspect that over time you're going to see a number of other people coming out with this type of feature. It's like I said, it's poor man's high availability.
And second part, when do you think the DOH fixes are coming? What kind of time frame?
DOH is already out there, actually. The Firefox people have been leading this program called the Trusted Recursive Resolver program. And you can actually go right into Firefox browser and just turn on that experimental feature right now, and it'll fully work without problems. I actually had used it on a phone with Firefox, and it was built in. So websites came up, so I assumed it was working. It's going to take time to implement at a browser level, and then hopefully at an operating system level. I would be shocked if it does not get implemented by Apple Computer or Microsoft or Google for Android or the Linux providers. I'd be shocked if it doesn't come out very, very quickly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all.
All right, you guys ready to hold on to your hats a little bit here? Okay, so we were touching on this whole idea of enumerating visitors, going users, user number 1, user number 10. You can actually start looking at users for their author pages. You can get it through other mechanisms. You can start finding out usernames, and then you're almost halfway home. You can start working on passwords. You can stop that with htaccess and nginx conf rules. If you're the only user on a website, you can set up something called basic auth, and known as HTTP password. It completely locks down. Actually, I think I mentioned very, very briefly that if you're the only user on a website, you have that good host and backups and updates, you can actually get away with only having basic auth, protecting a couple of pages, and do no other security and do very, very, very well. There are fail to ban plugins that communicate with the server's fail to ban. There's mechanisms by which to check something called the cron events that are going on. There are security-related cron events. They're timed or scheduled events that maintain WordPress in the background. You can actually check them, control them. Low volume websites, especially ultra low volume websites, do not have events triggering because they're not getting visitors, and there are ways around that. Not that I don't want to sound like a Cloudflare fanboy right now, but Cloudflare has free cron triggers that you can run on their server for free. just keeps on pinging your website. If you're really clever about it, you can have it start hitting up certain pages, and then it automatically starts putting them into the Cloudflare cache, so that when people visit it, it comes up really quickly. These ideas of this allow URL and allow URL include, those are things for PHP more than anything else. Most web hosts have completely disabled this. And you know, it says here, if you ever mucked with file permissions, here's the thing. Listen, you know, you could have maybe used a poorly set up FTP client. Maybe you did it by accident, where you tried to get some files on there, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I had a problem with this. And so, you know, if you feel like you had a problem with these things, especially over time, these are the simple things that you can do. Most important, at the very, very bottom, I wish I made it stand out a little bit, is make sure that every file has the right user and group. It's a Linux specific thing. However, if the user is called www.data, for example, you don't want to all of a sudden have ROOT. You'll have something that will just be problematic, and at worst, people can start getting access to your files that you don't want them to have access to. If you maintain your own host, if your own web server, or if you brought one to Cloudways or Run Cloud or GridPane, those types of services, you may want to do your own types of server level backups. You hear about things called MySQL dumps and auto MySQL backups and Restic and Duplicity and Borg. Those are the types of systems that people turn to. WordPress salts. These are authentication keys. You'll actually see these things tucked away in your WP config file. You can actually update them every once in a while. The upside is that it logs everybody out. The downside is it logs everybody out. These other things I think you'll see around there, and there's other things you can do besides just pingbacks and trackbacks. There's other discovery things that you can remove. RSS. There's editing. Little things that you can remove via functions.php. You can also remove. You get rid of those emojis. That's not a security concern, but listen. Unless that clown emoji just haunts you to no end, then you got a security concern. But other than that, I don't know. Pingbacks. And then this whole thing that says HTTP response headers. This is the doozy. And this is where I want to kind of really cover and get into. Whenever you make a request you click on a link, your browser requests data, and then what comes back to the browser are two things. It comes back with a header that describes what's being sent and where it was sent from, metadata, if you will, and then it also has the body itself, the actual contents. It also has some trailing data, but those are the key things right there. You can see it in Chrome Inspector. You can see these types of, this is where this particular screenshot came out of from a while ago. And if you look at the very, very bottom, right above where it says body, it says X frame options deny. That is very specifically a HTTP response header for security. So if you've never seen these things before, you can check them out. This starts getting a little technical, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, there's like this what? There's like what does that do? And they got this one, and now all of a sudden everyone's saying you got to add feature policy and say you don't have this and that, and it just goes on and on and on. There's a whole bunch of response headers that you'll see. But the thing is that in the end, there's only very few security related ones, and of these security related ones, I'll get into the details of the most important ones here. What's happened nowadays is now places are giving scores that you can easily look up, just like you can score your page speed, just like you can start seeing that type of performance information. You can now start getting a security score on your website. And I utilize webpagetest.org. There are the tools that you have out there. This is the one that just seems to be easiest to use. If you take a moment, you look right in the middle of that screen there. I don't know if you see that big red F here. That's a security score right there. And when you go to, when you specifically go to this, sorry about that. When you go to this particular web page test function and you click on that F, hopefully it's not an F, it'll bring you further information about what it needs to have. It is over time, you add enough things in there, you go from an F to an A, which is typical. I will run most of the sites that I have, family have, friends at, where I can control those websites and the content that goes on there over time. I will have them at a A+ security score. So what becomes that A+ security score? I mean, you can get these response headers onto your website using a plugin. There are plugins that do this. There are plugins that add headers, remove headers. It is not the way to go. Oh, you can even put code in to your theme. You can put code into your theme that will do it as well. You can put, but you can use meta tags to insert this information as well. Not the right way to do it. You want to stay away from doing the server manipulations, these HTTP header response. Keep them as much as possible in htaccess, in Nginx cont files. Keep them in places where the security professionals expect them to be, so that in case a plugin has to be disabled, your security doesn't go to hack. So I'm going to cover the top 5, 6 of these, the important ones. So, all right, now all of a sudden, this is getting a little crazy here. Strict transport security. That is, does everybody understand what I'm doing here? I'm just trying to break down the security response headers that come out. This one here essentially just tells the clients how long they should cache HTTPS policy information. The client itself, your web browser, will make sure that it doesn't have to keep on checking back to see if it's HTTPS trustworthy. They'll call these policies, will also be referred to as HSTS policies. They're so good to use, except if you serve up any of the older HTTP traffic. You can set it for how many years you want it to be there. This right here, there was that 315, that's 1 year. You can have a maximum age up to 2 years of the data being served. The interesting thing about this also is that there is a thing called preload. It is not something that you want to play around with. What preload does is it actually literally tells every browser as it updates that this site is completely secure. The bummer is that if all of a sudden you're doing troubleshooting in your site and you have to turn off anything for a little while, HTTPS, all of a sudden your site will not appear at all to people who are using those browsers. So the removal of those preload directives is slow and it's painful and it cannot easily be undone. So first one to try to shove in there. Second one, something that deals with clickjacking. Clickjacking is how do I say this? It's an attack that kind of tricks your users into clicking something that's on your web page that is either invisible or something that's disguised as another element on the page. It's some people would say it's like the inserting of frames or iframes onto a website. But one of the things is that you have to get specific on the information that you display here. If you are embedding Facebook or YouTube, or if you're using something called WP Ultimo for multi-site, you want to be very, very specific to allow something called an allow-from specifier here. So you can say allow from a specified location. Facebook can display on my website. That's okay. No one else can. Only people coming from the exact same origin, the same website, can do it. Some people even put the word deny, D-E-N-Y, in place of same origin, just a little bit more aggressive. medium severity to that one compared to the previous one, which is a high severity one. A low severity one, not as important, is the X content type options. This particular header is, they have these things called MIME types, M-I-M-E. And what happens is that you can upload content to a website, and you could actually disguise a file type as another file type. And all of a sudden, you can potentially compromise a website by performing something called cross-site scripting, compromise it, bring it down that way by getting through it. And essentially, you're just sniffing through some data in order to allow that to occur. It's very prominent under some old Microsoft products. It actually is, there's exploits that are now out in the wild. We're doing this with Chrome. When downloading extensions within Chrome, you can actually do exploits to websites now. I don't think they have an easy way around that from what I understand. That whole idea, by the way, about this cross-site scripting gets taken care of in large part with this HTTP header. It's a high severity header. And again, that cross-site scripting is kind of like where code is injected. And the kind of, I was gonna say interesting thing, the sad thing is that code can get injected to perform actions in the user's browser on behalf of another website. It can happen with a user clicking around, but it can actually happen in the background. The user would not even necessarily know that they were infiltrated by a cross-site scripting attack. This header does not necessarily prevent that from occurring. However, it enables the filter for this that is built into most of the modern web browsers. The next one, I should have saved this one for the last. I should have saved this one for last because this is the doozy. If you're taking screenshots or if you're looking at these later on in a slide or a presentation, oh man, easy does it with this. What you're looking at the screen right now are security starter policies. I would not necessarily just copy these and paste these in verbatim. Yeah, the top one maybe, but you got to be careful. So content security policy HTTP header allows you to actually restrict what resources will actually get utilized when the browser loads. This is kind of clever because all of a sudden you can start saying that JavaScript that is coming from some other page, other website, CSS that's coming from some other location cannot be loaded. That's essentially what this does. If you notice the bottom one, which is a very specific copy and paste from an Nginx conf file, that particular content security policy does allow for Google fonts to occur. It also allows for icons to appear in the gravatar for users. The one that is above does not allow for that content to appear. If you do this right, you take care of cross-site scripting, you take care of clickjacking, you take care of a lot of other code injection attacks. It's actually kind of impressive, except you have to whitelist. You have to come one by one to go through each and every particular thing you want whitelisted. That gets really crazy over time. This happens to be a working one. I wish I can show you what non-looking, it can get out of hand. Oh, interestingly enough, going back one slide, this policy was actually set in WordPress's default theme 2019. The theme itself very explicitly set the content security policy to allow only its inline scripts and CSS. It allowed for dynamic code evaluation to be done. It had a data source specifically for the fonts it was utilizing. It actually was kind of impressive that it can be set in a theme. Like I mentioned, it can be set in a plugin, but this particular code is specifically oriented towards servers. Yeah, that just makes my head hurt right there. That does. And probably the lowest type of HTTP header alteration that you should do is, it's a low severity one. It's called refer policy. It essentially lets, it lets users know where the inbound visitor came from. You know, when you click on a website, it tells you on the website where you came from. We all use this in Google Analytics. You know, all the metrics that come from Google Analytics tells us where it came from. I know that 4,000 users came from Twitter this week because it said my website said, the analytics said that it had this refer header in it. So there are ways and times that you may want to control or even restrict the amount of information that's presented in this type of header. Or you can actually even say, I don't want that header to appear at all in some cases. There are particular reasons for it. So HTTP response headers, those top 5 will get you to an A+ score. The 6th one is no longer counted in a lot of scores, simply because the other ones can take care of the majority of it. The other ones that are listed are also security related as well. So there are other ones that you can look into. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. That's a lot. It's a lot. How are you guys doing?
All right. Dean's got a question.
I'm drowning. Hey, so just help me understand the response headers. These are coming from the server to the browser, and there's a mixture in there, I believe, of things that describe how the server will perform, but also instructions to the browser. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. I wouldn't necessarily say these are instructions to the browser. Those are usually, the HTML are instructions on how to render things. These are, no, you know what? You're correct. They're instructions to the browser for how limited they can be or how open they can be from a security standpoint. There are other types of response headers that are just more informational, while these are security.
So that leads to my question, which is if someone really wants in, can they hack a browser and ignore at least that half of the rules that are sent out to the browser? Is that kind of the next realm of where hackers are going to be headed?
No, hackers have been there for quite a while. They call those types of things man-in-the-middle attacks. So somebody can get in between you and the server that you're trying to communicate with.
Okay.
Have you been doing anything wrong there, Dean, that we should know about?
No, I didn't hear my brain spinning. Sorry.
All right.
I mean, when you say we need to prevent against something, I'm trying to think, well, what are the other guys thinking? Well, how are they going to get around it? You know, what are the holes? So,
yeah,
I do hosting, so I worry maybe a little more than some other folks.
Okay. So the next section will be in your realm then for hosting.
Okay. Doug Noyle's next.
So those went by pretty quick. I could probably figure this out by going through it again, but can't some of those, eliminating some of those response headers, screw up your analytics?
I'm thinking about the answer for that. Can some of them screw up your analytics? No, actually, they would potentially, that last one that I showed, can potentially muck with other people's analytics more than anything else. Meaning it won't tell them where your link came from.
Right. But not my own, like say Google Analytics reports and stuff like that. Okay.
No, none of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Laura's next.
Hi. I wondered, let me get rid of my hand, what you think of malcare.
Malcare, 2 big thumbs up. There's 2 aspects of malcare. One of which is the software that they have, and the other thing that they have is their ability to remediate a hacked website. As far as people taking care of a hacked website, there is no better team that is out there that is responsive than the malcare and the word fence people to do it. Actually, Security, I think, is now, their turnaround is really, really quick. The software malcare is fairly similar. It is not in itself a web application firewall. It is much more of a reporting type of tool. It's good reporting, but it's not a web application firewall.
Okay. I don't think we have anyone else with questions.
All right. I feel like I wrote this slide here for Dean. Yeah. So this kind of stuff now gets really heavy. This is, it is now possible to go out and purchase a VPS, a virtual private server. You can do it for $3.50 and get yourself a fairly decent web server, as long as you maintain it yourself, right? That's the key behind it. I'll tell you something, for $5, you can get a really, really decent DigitalOcean droplet, as they call them, and be off to the races and have a really powerful system out there. But there's lots of reasons not to do it. And this comes down to, like, I think there's 9 slides that are possible, but I only have 3. In the end, the key here is just making sure that you have the technical capability of maintaining the systems. This is not necessarily like, oh, this is my checklist for what I need to do. I mean, it could be, but in the end, if you have your own server, your own VPS, and these things that I'm showing you here in this slide and the next ones, if they look foreign, you're not in the right place. You should not be maintaining your own VPS, or you should expect that it's a honeypot and people are going to come fishing in your direction and start taking stuff out of your little website. So there are a lot of different techniques that are out there for hardening a VPS. I would start there. The thing is that, there's this setup instructions. You can go to DigitalOcean.com, or you can go to all these different sites, and they'll tell you exactly step by step, copy and paste and copy and paste. And oh, look at this. All of a sudden, you have a website running. Copy and paste and copy and paste. Look at this. You have PHP running. Copy and paste. Hey, look at that. A database. Hey, copy and paste. Oh, WordPress. Boom. And look how fast it is. It's really nice. The thing is that only got you to a certain extent. It doesn't get you the updates down the road. It doesn't keep your server secure by any stretch of imagination. It doesn't mean that your PHP is going to be up to date. There's a lot to it. And from a firewall standpoint, there are firewalls that you can place at your VPS level on your server that don't have to necessarily be the things that are intended for HT access for Apache specifically. So this famous 6G firewall that's out there now, 7G, there's even was 5G for a while. A little bit of limitations for implementation. You're best off going right to the bottom of this slide here and going right for, the true firewalls, IP tables and UFW. You see that a lot on Debian and Ubuntu systems, CSF, LFD. You'll see that a lot on CentOS, Linux systems. Fail to ban is almost all over the place with stuff. There are also ways of getting into the ability for you to type onto the server, do command line typing onto a server. They refer to that as SSH into your server, secure shell into your server. There are steps that you can take very explicitly to lock those down. Usually some of the first steps that you would want to take when having that new server. A lot of these hardening techniques begin there. On Cloudflare, you can actually tell your server to always pay great attention to these particular Cloudflare things. You know what, Cloudflare, we're going to work hand in hand together with your server. Let's do a little dance. Matter of fact, I have something called fail to ban that's running on my server. Let's make it talk to Cloudflare. And all of a sudden, they're banning everything together. All of a sudden, somebody starts attacking Cloudflare. Next thing you know, your website's protected against the exact same stuff, even if Cloudflare gets taken offline. Unused ports are a big thing. Unused ports, if you know, for people that don't understand what these are, 80 is web internet traffic across the web, HTTP. TCP 443 is HTTPS. You want to keep very limited ports open, very limited. On servers as well, I hope people who are maintaining their own servers occasionally run a server-based malware detection. And then after you run the malware detection, you go out of your way to do your updates. Then make sure you have the backups. It's a back and forth kind of thing. This is a big one for a lot of people that maintain their own web hosts that are just first time doing it. They have all the sites that are running under the exact same Linux user and Linux group. And next thing you know, one site goes down, and then all of a sudden, all the other sites have the same problem. For years and years and years, a lot of web hosts suffered from that. Somebody's site was hacked, and it started bringing down other people's sites. There are ways to expire passports, rotate passwords on sites, and that thing that's at the very bottom is one of my current favorites right now. There are these really simple little pieces of code snippets that you can run that will block a lot of bots that are out there, including people are maintaining these collections of hunting bots that are coming from known gray hat and black hat. Actually, one of the list has white hat hackers. It very specifically blocks them, and one of the nice ones is something called WP Scan, which lets somebody or a bot scan your site to see what version it's running, what plugins are going on, form stuff, things like that. You can block all of that with a relative amount of ease. Somebody, we were talking earlier about ModSec, MODSEC, Mod Security. I promised somebody that I would put into this presentation that ModSec is a biatch. And the one thing I'm looking forward to is sending them this recording, because ModSec is a biatch. It is one of the best web application firewalls that you can get for free. But if you don't set it up exactly correct with the right rule set for WordPress, it can be problematic. It was seriously overkill for most sites, by far overkill. So if your particular host allows you to do a 6G or 7G as for free versus a ModSec for free, pick one of the other ones. If you're doing your own VPS and you have the time to go through ModSec, you will lock down the vast majority of most attacks, a crazy amount. I think some of these other things in here are things that you might want to try to do. I don't think you have to do them. There is this idea here about WP Scan. I mentioned one slide back, which is a system that you can run on a website as well as a command line that will start scanning your site. Every once in a while, why not just go in there and see what your site shows on these reports? I think it'll tell you a lot about not only the server you're running on, but how each individual site, what they have on it. And that last one, that deny lists, you can start collecting up previous aggression IPs, even ones that are out there and known, and start limiting them pretty successfully. And then you can throw that into ModSec, and all of a sudden you're really blocking a lot of the crappy traffic out there. And then you throw in country code blocking with Cloudflare or other things, you're blocking another bunch of crap. And then you throw in the Nginx or Apache ultimate bad bot blockers. And in the end, you're ending up with a lot of like real traffic. The sucky part is your Google Analytics are going to look really bad for a little while, because you can be like, oh my God, that was all my bot traffic. What was that all about? So Doug, do we have any questions about those last things? I don't mind going back a little bit also. I went through those pretty quickly.
No one's got their hand raised. Anyone? Asim?
David, I have a scenario around DDoS attack, which one of my clients faced. So is this the right time to ask that?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So basically, my client is in cyber security industry, so they get targeted attack quite a lot. So it's like it's kind of every day. What we have done is that we have put their website behind Security Firewall. And that protects us quite a lot, even the APIs, XML, RPC, and also the traffic. Most of the traffic does not come to our own server because because Security also caches our files, our pages, and it sends it. So most of the traffic is actually from Security to the browsers and not from our server to browsers. But once we faced an attack where it was a DDoS attack, and the person was hitting a lot of requests from various IPs. So one single IP was not used more than 5 to 6 times, and he was attacking like thousands of requests per minute from various IPs. Okay, so first he tried to do that with the valid URLs. That did not reach our server because those pages were delivered from Security itself to the browsers or the bots. Then what he did was that then the attacker started requesting for the invalid URLs. And as those URLs were not present on the Security, they were sending it to our server. And we were getting hit by all 404 requests. Our server went down because the attacker was requesting all invalid URLs, more than 1,000 per minute. So what could have been done at that point of time?
All right. So I hope everybody understood the nature of what was happening there. So I think what Asim was referring to here is that there was a distributed denial of service attack that was targeted towards a specific website. And there was a broker, a web application firewall, Security, that was not, am I correct that they were not filtering it all, or were they making a whole bunch of different 400 status code bad requests, or do you know what that is?
Right, so they were not able to filter it because one IP was not used more than 5 to 6 times. And the attack was happening from a whole range of IPs. So they could not identify that it is a DDoS attack. So if the URL is valid, they would deliver the page from their server and request will not reach to our servers. But if the URL is not valid, then Security does not know whether they are not able to deliver the web page from their server, and they come to our server to request for that web page. And as they are hitting more and more invalid URLs, our server got, and it actually went down.
Yeah, that's exactly the nature of a malformed request for a distributed denial of service. So the question is, how do you prevent that? Security is a web application firewall with limited DDoS protection. I don't think it has any runtime self-protection. I know it doesn't have any bot protection or attack analytics that come with it. It's mostly for the web application firewall. So my suggestion would probably be without knowing the exact case, is to look into a really strong reverse proxy system that will make sure that Security is not the reverse proxy, but one that is quote unquote stronger is in place of that. One of the ones that is most popular amongst the high volume sites is Encapsula. Very, very, very popular. There's Imperva. And by the way, these types of systems, they will fail for a little while. Usually they have, when all of a sudden you get flooded with traffic, either targeted or not targeted, the mitigation time can be anywhere between 1 and 10 seconds. And if your server is on the higher end, by the way, you pay for that. If you want a universal DDoS protection that's taking 1 second, to mitigate. You pay for those services. You know, like I think Encapsular is like it's like 3-second mitigation time. But once you start going higher than that, and this may be what you're facing, Asim, is that the server is just in a position where it cannot do anything with the requests that are being filtered through. So essentially, the time for mitigation at the DDoS level is not fast enough, and probably not getting the right DDoS protection. It's only getting web application firewall protection. Oh my God, I need a beer after that one. Okay. Yeah, did that make sense?
I understood what you are saying, and I'll just tell you what we did. What we did is that our server was sending the information to the Sucuri, and we actually put a Cloudflare in front of Sucuri as well. So browser was accessing the request to Cloudflare for DDoS protection. Then it comes to Sucuri, and then it comes to our server. What do you think of that?
Are you paying for Cloudflare, or are you using?
No, it's the free one.
The free one. The free one will actually, the free one actually does it fairly well. It doesn't block all of the attacks. You can actually read what attacks it does block for the mitigation. And for what it's worth, they recently made it unmetered mitigation. So it used to be they only limited for a certain time, but now their free plan lets you keep on going. So I would think, by the way, your solution will work, because what Cloudflare really is, it is a reverse proxy. It's not a CDN, it is a reverse proxy. So you're inserting a reverse proxy into it. I would be shocked if that $20, if you're willing to pay the $20 per month for the pro plan with Cloudflare, you can completely eliminate security, unless you need their, their fixing, right, where they fix the websites, hacked websites. But you may be able to move fully over to the pro Cloudflare and not only worry about the DDoS side of things, but take advantage of everything else that comes with it. I mean, I'm not just talking about the web application firewall and the DDoS mitigation, but you get some special SSL certificates, you get, WebP, you get a lot out of their plan. But it's more of the professional level, right? This is not for a simple blog or a simple brochure site.
Okay, so the another advantage which I've seen with Sucuri is that it understands WordPress pretty well. So it blocks all the different APIs, XML, RPC, all these kind of things, WP config, all these kind of things is inbuilt, taken care by Sucuri. So, but that advantage is not available with Cloudflare, as far as I have seen.
No, they are available under Cloudflare in the network level architecture. They have a WordPress. So what you're looking for is a cloud provider that has WordPress specific rules, which is that web application firewall that knows about WordPress, and more importantly, knows about its current plugins that came out yesterday. Cloudflare, I think I had mentioned briefly, Encapsular, Cloudflare, WordFence, those particular systems are constantly being updated. WebArcs is also something being constantly updated, but they're not at that same level.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and the other, by the way, the other nice thing about the downside is that Security has a really beautiful dashboard, as you noticed, right? Tells you a lot of information. You will not get that same kind of reporting out of Cloudflare, security reporting.
Thanks a lot, David. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyone else with questions? Nope. All right.
Right. So does anybody want to start their own VPS now? It's a constant maintaining type of thing you need to do. You can now buy these VPSs and you can take them to places like Cloudways and RunCloud and GridPane, and they will do all the maintenance of those servers for you. And most of them do a really exceptional job of setting up all those little bells and whistles that I had just mentioned. So, yeah. So let me ask a question here. Does anybody have any questions, anything? Because now I'm getting into the home stretch here, and I want to make sure that if, I didn't really spend a lot of time on two-factor authentication and spend a lot of time on plugins. Are there any other questions that people feel like they maybe didn't get answered in the previous presentation or in this one?
Doug Noyle.
Yes, thank you. So I might have asked this in the previous presentation too, but now it's surfacing again after seeing all this information. So with somebody like GridPane or RunCloud or any of those that you just mentioned, and using the firewalls that they provide, the just quick click turn on stuff, like say ModSec or 6G or whatever, soon to be 7G. Is there any issue or any thoughts of interference between those and running additional measures like Cloudflare or the like?
I wish you could see me right now. I'm laughing here. Yes, there is. There are issues with that. I'm trying to think of an easy way to answer this. So most, if not all of those providers that I mentioned there, the RunCloud, the Cloudways, and the GridPane, they know how to configure their servers to work properly when they see traffic coming through Cloudflare. If you just set up your own service, if you just went in there and started copying and pasting command line stuff into your brand new server, and you keep on going back and forth and you configure things, and then you add your Let's Encrypt onto that type of stuff like that, you may then start having hassles with Cloudflare. But otherwise, with most of those configured ones, I can't say that I've used RunCloud a lot, so I can't answer for all of them, but I have not seen any of those professional products that did not work with Cloudflare properly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I even briefly mentioned that if you do have problems, I think, I didn't say it that way, whitelist your Cloudflare IP addresses. Like you have to go into the highest level firewall that you have running and tell it that Cloudflare is cool to go. And then it eliminates most of the problems.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, not just for Cloudflare, but Encapsula, Security, they all provide the public, they put out the list of their IP addresses so that you can whitelist them. Yeah. You know what? Allow list. I'm going to start saying allow list.
All right, Asim is next.
I'm sorry, I'm asking too many questions, but I guess the slides are over, right? So I can ask now.
Go for it.
Hello?
Yeah.
Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So as you just mentioned that we should try not to have our own VPS. Have you ever tried a package by Bitnami? Normally we use that to host on our own VPS. Any feedback on that? Bitnami plus Automatic has a package which they provide on Amazon or maybe GCP or even DigitalOcean.
Yep. So for people that don't know what we're referring to here is that a number of these cloud providers, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Services, DigitalOcean, Vultr, Amazon Web Services, they have these one-click deploy a whole server functionality. So with one click, you can actually get a whole server running with the security, with the firewall, with the speed, with everything, with WordPress running one click for $5.95. And Bitnami is one of the most popular ones out there. Bitnami, Bitnami. It's kind of like a pre-configured, ready to go, one-click WordPress install. It works really, 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 really well. You have to still keep it updated. So what that means is you have to go in there every once in a while. And I think they're running under Ubuntu. You got to do an app update, an app upgrade. You have to make sure the server needs to be, if it needs to be restarted, you have to make sure that it's still restarted at a down. You have to do all those types of updates, right? That makes sense that way? So
Right.
Bitnami, great start. You have to still do all those maintenance things that I had just shown over those last 3 slides.
Okay. Okay. So after that, it
Um,
is workable.
By the way, Asim, one other thing, if I can mention one, I have a pet peeve about Bitnami is that the servers it creates for you, the default username is Bitnami.
Right. Right. It is.
That just rubs me the wrong way that they took their own username and they escalated all the privileges, and everybody out in the world knows that that username exists with escalated privileges is just not, it's not, I don't like it.
Hmm. Hmm, hmm, hmm. Makes sense. Completely makes sense. Okay. Another question. In one of your slides, you mentioned about the basic authentication for the admin pages and login pages. So you mentioned that we should not have a basic authentication. I think I am assuming you are talking about the HTXS, the Apache password, the Apache ID password, if I'm correct.
That is correct. That's exactly it. So
Right.
that was
So
the, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So if not to use the basic authentication, then what type of authentication would you suggest for it?
So if you are the only user or somebody that you truly trust, you can use basic auth because you have very, very few people signing in. If you have more than one user or you don't want to use basic auth, then you want to use a 2-factor authentication of some type. Usually the timed 1Password ones are the most effective, but there are other types of other things that you can use. CAPTCHA is a popular one. Matter of fact, if you're using Cloudflare, I think you mentioned using Cloudflare. Cloudflare has something in it called Challenge and JS Challenge.
Right.
Yeah, you've probably seen
Correct.
JS Challenge. You can set JS Challenge to your WP-admin directory, and ain't no one getting through unless they know what they're doing, right? You know what I mean by that? So that's the other ways around it, but it's still some sort of additional authentication besides the username and password.
Okay. Okay.
And by the way, the downside for everybody here, the downside to multi-factor authentication, the 2-factor authentication, is learning how it works, number one. And then number two is convincing others to use it, that it's easy to use, you know? I have a number of people that are reluctant to use it, you know? And they just, that's hard. It's another step. I got to do this. I got to pull out my phone now and get a lot of what?
That's a very fair point. It's very hard to convince clients to use that. It's very hard.
Did you have another question, Asim? I think you were about to get onto something else.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Oh, come on. There has to be more.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Hi, David. What do you think about the plugin WP Server?
As far as using it, or?
Yeah, using it on the WordPress sites, do you feel it's secure? I'm familiar with some of the other ones you brought up, but when I researched the other ones on security, I, for some reason, ended up going with WP Server and have liked it. It does require some setup, some configuration, but it does a lot of what you've recommended in your slides.
Now, you're talking about WPCEBER, correct? Server.
Yes, that is correct.
With a C, got it, yes. Correct. So they've been around for a long time. I happen to like that they have a good pricing, but you know, it's like a one-time kind of pricing. Bulletproof Security Pro is less expensive and has more functionality, and that's why I recommended it. It was that simple.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, the downside, by the way, to Bulletproof Security Pro is its interface is, you know, it's like, you know, 1979 DOS has come back to haunt you.
All right, thank you.
Laura's got a question.
Hi. So is the free Cloudflare, which it sounds like is what you recommend for free, is it a WAF?
So it is not a web application firewall unless you pay for their pro version, which is $20 per month. It's the pricier of the web application firewalls that are out there. Additionally, that $5 APO feature that they have, which provides a little bit more one-click security, I guess is a way to call it, one-click optimization, that also does not include the web application firewall.
All right, I don't see anyone else with questions.
You know, I'm really starting to
No.
sound like
Never mind.
I love all things. I'll get to Doug in a second here. I was going to say, you know, Cloudflare provides a heck of a lot of other functionality besides just that security aspect of things. And I think that's why they can easily get away with charging $20 per month and getting it from a large number of companies.
All right, Doug Noyle's got a question.
Okay, yeah, what was my question? Oh, so just a point blank, in your opinion, if you are going to use, I think you made the comment about you can get away with using one of the cheaper hosts and using one of the, either the free Cloudflare or the $5 Cloudflare or whatever on top of it, you can get yourself into a pretty good secure situation. And I was just wanting to get reminded of that. What do you mean by cheaper hosting? Because if you're going to pay what, $8 to $12 a month for cheap hosting, and then you're going to add $5 onto it, you're into the $13 to $15 realm. Then you're running into getting into managed hosting anyway. If you might as well jump to $20 a month. So I was trying to have that debate in my head. So I thought I'd ask that question, if that makes sense. Is that clear as mud?
It is so super clear. So yeah, no, actually, it is really clear, because this becomes now, where do you start spending your dollars the wisest, right? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Should you just ignore it all and just go for a WP Engine or Kinsta $30 minimum plan, or should you start splitting it up and whatnot? So, you know, let's see if I can say this. I was just extremely impressed how I was able to take a $3.95 plan and add $5 to it and have it test really, really well in Austria. All right. I've never seen that before. And it was secure also when I remotely tested it. And so that's why I was impressed with that new APO functionality that Cloudflare has. I also see it as it's kind of like an optimization and partial security. You literally you set up Cloudflare, you install a plugin, you flip one switch, and it does all the work. So I happen to appreciate things that do things that easily. I don't know if that's partially answering your question. You know, to a large extent, there is you know, I'd rather pay for to a large extent for a really good activity logger, you know, like a WP audit log or something like that, like the professional version that gives me all the information about who really did get through, or my real security concern sometimes comes from within. Who the heck just all of a sudden added that plugin there, you know? I really didn't get into this whole idea about, you know, limiting automatic updating, right? There's this whole realm of what you can put into your WP config file to prevent internal security sides. So in some cases, it's worthwhile spending money on that security. So for my personal and my small and one medium-sized customer, I have my own servers that are running on something called CentMin mod. It's a variation, it's a whole setup of Linux that provides all the functionality and very, very easy, and all the high security. And without Cloudflare, we'll do it at speeds that are comparable, if not faster than the best, like the Kinsta and the WordFence and stuff like that. But here's the big but. In the end, I still have to turn Cloudflare on, and in the end, I have to do all those updates. Yesterday was November 1st, and that's my first of the month. It's time to hunker down and update all the people I have on maintenance plans, all the websites, all the plugins, check it out, do all the backups, update the servers. It's like, so it doesn't get rid of the time that it takes to do that for me, right? I still
You can do that all in one day? Wow.
No, I didn't say that, did I?
That's the way I took it.
No, the worst part, I was gonna say the worst part is I have two servers that are out there that are honeypots that are sitting there with, like, they're broken, and I'm hoping that somebody's gonna hack on them or something like that kind of thing. And every once in a while I'm like, oh, I should go update that server. I'm like, no, don't update that server. That's the purpose of the server being out there. Don't update it. Let somebody bring it down.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Oh, who was the $3.99 service you chose to test with?
Hetzner.
Say that again?
Hetzner. Hetzner is a service that is out of Europe. They have servers that are located in lots of other different locations, and they're cheap and easy to sign up for. And yeah, and I can be anonymous with them also. So I didn't have to worry about all of a sudden if the server did come crashing down that I would get in trouble. But of course, listen, it was definitely one of those, like, you can pay $3.95 a month for the first 3 months. It was one of those plans, right? Wow. Anything else? So anything. We didn't, it's kind of funny. We didn't talk about security plugins that much. Any kind of questions about those? I think I mentioned, I'll keep on saying it, there's no 100% most complete security plugin. I also mentioned that you can get away with having one security plugin on your site, which is two-factor authentication, a multi-factor authentication. That's the minimal low-hanging fruit, as long as you have those backups and good practices and great hosts and stuff like that. So let me talk about things that you can pay attention to. The security glossary, there's so much in this world of security, and so many codes and acronyms, and this one thing from WP White Security is really extensive, really good, and they actually update it, which is kind of impressive, as not just as like new things are coming out, but expanding all the knowledge that's there. There is a database called WP Scan Vulnerability Database. It is free for you to sign up on it, and they have a very, very interesting monthly newsletter. It's interesting is the wrong word, totally the wrong word. A very, very geeky security, once a month WordPress specific newsletter that goes out, and you can actually scroll through the list and say, gosh, dang it, I was using that plugin and now it's on this other website, blah, blah, blah. So at the very bottom here, it says, Think Like a Hacker podcast. This is from the folks over at WordFence. They do a really nice outreach job. Every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time, they have something called office hours, where you can actually join them on their YouTube channel and ask them any type of security question. I've seen the range beginner to them actually finding a brand new exploit during the Wednesday YouTube session. So things to pay attention to. There's a lot of other things. So listen, everybody, thank you again. Thank you. I really hope I didn't cause too many headaches with this second part 2 presentation. I really do hope that you go back and replay it. Hopefully it'll make more sense as time is going on. If you think that you need to do any types of improvements that you haven't taken care of, that I mentioned before with the backups, multi-factor authentication, maybe take a moment and start looking into how to get those security headers in there. See how far you can take the web page test from going from a very typical D up into A plus, even if you can do that one. So here's my contact information. Thank you for letting me do this with you guys. There will be this presentation that is being recorded on the website within the next week and a half. The slides will also be up there, but you can always shoot me an email. And that's it. I just stopped the recording there. Can everybody still hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I feel like I just completely hurt my own head in this process.